The alarm had not yet rung when Sarah opened her eyes. It was 4:47 in the morning, and the bedroom was wrapped in that particular kind of darkness that feels both heavy and holy. The kind that exists only in the hours before dawn, when the world has not yet remembered its noise. Sarah lay still, staring at the ceiling, her hands folded across her chest like a woman already in prayer, though she had not consciously begun one. She had not slept well. She had not slept well in weeks. The bills on the kitchen counter had multiplied like quiet, paper-thin enemies. The job interview she had prepared for 3 months had ended with a polite rejection email. Her mother's health was declining in a small hospital 3 states away, and Sarah could not afford the flight to go see her. Her marriage, once a garden of warmth, had become a silence so thick it could be cut with a knife. And her faith, that steady, burning thing she had carried since childhood, had begun, for the first time in her 34 years of life, to flicker. She did not want to admit that, but it was true. She got up quietly, so as not to wake her husband Daniel, who slept beside her with the easy unconsciousness of a man who had somehow not yet broken. She walked to the small living room, sat on the worn couch near the window, and pulled her knees to her chest like a child. Outside, the sky was still dark. Not a single star was visible. Streetlights looked tired. Sarah whispered, not quite to the room, not quite to herself, "God, I don't know if you are listening. I don't know if you have ever listened, but if you are there, I need you to tell me. I need you to say something, because I am running out of words, and I am running out of strength, and I don't know what comes next." She waited. Nothing came, or so she thought. 3 weeks earlier, her neighbor, an elderly Jamaican woman named Miss Cecile, who smelled always of ginger tea and wore colorful head wraps regardless of the weather, had knocked on Sarah's door with a pot of soup and an expression of such profound peace that Sarah had felt almost jealous. "You look like a woman fighting alone," Miss Cecile had said, setting the soup on the counter without being invited in, because she had long since moved past needing invitations. "I'm fine," Sarah had said, the universal lie of exhausted women everywhere. Miss Cecile had looked at her with eyes that had clearly seen many fine women fall apart, and said, "God's blessing is not something He withholds from you because you are struggling. He withholds nothing. It is we who close our hands so tight around our fear that there is no room left to receive." Sarah had smiled politely and eaten the soup alone after Miss Cecile left, and told herself that it was a lovely thought for people who had the luxury of believing it. But the words had stayed. "We close our hands so tight around our fear that there is no room left to receive." Back on the couch in the early morning dark, Sarah did something she had not done in a very long time. She opened her hands, literally, physically. She uncurled her fingers and laid her palms face up on her knees, an old posture of prayer her grandmother had taught her, the posture of a person who is not demanding but receiving, not commanding but surrendering. And she said, out loud this time, with a steadiness that surprised her, "I give it to you. Fear, the debt, the anger, the grief about my mother, the silence with Daniel, all of it. I don't know how to carry it anymore. So I am giving it to you. As you said, your burden is light, and mine has become unbearable." The apartment was silent, and Sarah would spend the rest of her life trying to describe this moment to people, and never quite finding the right words. Something shifted, not in the room, not in the air, not in any physical, measurable, scientifically verifiable way, but something shifted inside her, in the deep cavity beneath her ribs, where she had been storing all of her dread. It was as though a hand, warm, enormous, entirely unhurried, had pressed gently against her chest from the inside, and a thought arrived, not in words exactly, but in something more total than words, the way music is more total than the lyrics written about it. "My blessing is upon you. It has always been upon you. You were never outside of it." Sarah sat very still for a long moment. Then she began to cry. Not the desperate, frightened crying she had been doing in private for months, but something else entirely. Something that felt, strangely, like relief, like a woman who has been lost for a very long time, and has just, at last, found the road home. That morning, 3 things happened. The first, Daniel woke up and found Sarah in the living room with red eyes and open palms. And instead of asking what was wrong, he sat down beside her and took her hands in his, the first real voluntary physical contact they had shared in months, and said nothing, because some moments are too large for language. The second, Sarah received a phone call from a woman named Dr. Patricia Ose, who had been given Sarah's contact information by a mutual colleague. Dr. Ose was launching a nonprofit focused on women's economic empowerment and needed a program coordinator with exactly Sarah's background. The salary was not extraordinary, but it was honest work, and it was meaningful work. And it was, Sarah recognized with a jolt of something electric. Exactly the kind of work she had prayed about years ago, before she'd gotten too practical to pray about such things. The third, her mother called from the hospital. Not with bad news, but with a voice that sounded clearer than it had in months. "I had the best sleep," her mother said. "I dreamed of your grandmother. She told me to tell you that you are not forgotten." Sarah sat in the kitchen after that call and laughed. A real laugh, a laugh that startled the cat off the windowsill. Because the universe, or God, or whatever word one uses for the force that moves beneath the surface of all things, had apparently decided that subtlety was no longer the appropriate tool. None of these things fixed everything. That is important to say. The bills did not disappear. The journey of rebuilding her marriage with Daniel was slow and sometimes painful, and required conversations they had both been avoiding for years. Her mother's health remained uncertain. The world remained as it has always been, a complicated and often sorrowful place, but something fundamental had changed in Sarah. She had stopped waiting for the blessing to arrive as though it were a package she had ordered, something that would come on a specific day, in a recognizable box, delivered by a comprehensible process. She had begun instead to understand something Miss Cecile had been trying to tell her all along. The blessing is not a future event. It is a present reality. It is the breath in your lungs. It is the fact of your continuation. It is every morning you wake up with your hand still capable of being open. She began to write this down in a small notebook she kept on the nightstand, not as theology, not as philosophy, but as personal testimony. Things she noticed each day that she had previously walked past without recognition. The way Daniel laughed at a joke on television, and how she had almost forgotten how much she loved the sound of his laugh. The way the morning light came through the kitchen window at exactly 7:15 in June and turned the whole room amber. The way her new colleagues at Dr. Ose's organization spoke about their work with a passion so genuine it was contagious. The way her mother said, "I love you," at the end of every phone call now, without hesitation, without embarrassment, as though she had decided that life was too short for silent love. Small things, ordinary things. But Sarah had begun to understand that blessings are, almost always, ordinary things seen with extraordinary eyes. 6 months later, Sarah stood in front of a room of 40 women, young mothers, recent immigrants, women rebuilding after loss, and told them a version of this story. She did not tell them that God would solve their problems on a timetable they could predict. She did not tell them that faith was the absence of doubt, or that prayer was a transaction in which the faithful investor always received a guaranteed return. She told them this: "There was a morning when I sat in my living room with nothing, no certainty, no plan, no confidence that anything I had ever believed was true. And I opened my hands, not because I was strong, because I had run out of other options. And in that emptiness and in that total terrifying openness, I felt something I cannot fully explain to you. I felt that I was held. I felt that I had always been held. I felt that the holding was not something I had earned by being good enough or faithful enough or strong enough. It was simply there, like gravity, like light, like the fact of being alive at all. God's blessing is not upon a future version of you who has figured everything out, not upon a version of you who never doubts or struggles or falls apart at 4 a.m. Upon you exactly as you are, right now, in this room, with all of your fear and all of your uncertainty and all of your unfinished, imperfect, magnificent life. Open your hands. It is already there. The room was quiet for a moment. Then a young woman in the second row, she could not have been more than 22, holding a sleeping infant against her shoulder, closed her eyes, turned her face slightly upward, and opened her hands in her lap. Sarah, watching, felt the warmth beneath her ribs again. The same warmth, the same enormous, unhurried hand, pressing gently, saying, without words, what it had always been saying: "You are not forgotten. My blessing is upon you. It has always been. Now, at last, you are learning to receive."